President Bush recently has put into action a plan trying to control the more casual drug users, and I don't think this is the immediate problem. The problem is the importation of these actual drugs. It's not the casual pot user who smokes a joint now and then to catch a buzz and release some tension or stress. It's more like the major contributors to the entire importation, distribution that should be tried to control. On campus in particular, the problem seems to be not of using drugs, but the conflict between the non-legalization of drugs and the users, because it's against the law, obviously, and it's not a matter of addiction or abuse, I'd say, but more so simple infringement upon individual freedoms, which should be granted, I feel, in a case that is not so extreme as is made to be.
Harrisonburg, Virginia, in a recent survey comes out that with cities over 20,000 people population, we're the 9th least violent crime city in the nation. There is always a plethora of buds and of shrooms in the area, and they do never really seem to cause any type of violent crimes, as proved even by statistics.
In the cases where it does fall into the category of public offense or what have you, something that would be disturbing the rights of other people, I don't think that's the situation here. As far as under a national scope, I would say that drug trafficking, use, abuse, distribution is a problem in that it is causing a great apportionment of law enforcement and budgeting funds to control it. However, I think the problem is not with drugs that are used casually, but more harder, what might be termed as synthetic drugs or hardcore drugs such as ecstasy or other forms of cocaine, speed, smack, crack, what have you.
Okay. Jay Shepard, you can respond to that, and I'd like to throw in an additional question for you to answer, and that is, do you think we're being invaded by Washington, D.C.'s drugs and Richmond's drugs, and would we not have a drug problem if they didn't exist, and would we not have a drug problem if JMU students didn't exist?
I think Detective Clare could probably answer that better than I can. I'm not really, educated, and I'm not a police officer, and I don't really deal with the domestic scene. I know on campus myself, like I said, I've seen it, and I know that it goes on, even though people try to hide it from me, knowing what position I'm in. It really astounds me to the fact that people are not coming around and stopping this. The people that are not doing the drugs, allowing their friends to sit there and do it in front of them. It's getting to be a severe problem, as you can see that the military is getting involved. Once the military is involved, you already know that it's getting to a severe point.
Right. Okay, Detective Clater, are we being invaded by D.C.'s drug problem?
I don't think it's a matter of, especially that we're being invaded by D.C.'s drug problem. I think at one time our area was known as a small college town, and of course now we're growing at a rapid pace, and with that growth comes crime, and including drugs. And actually what we're seeing is problems that other areas, such as Washington's had in the past, is now finally coming to our area.
Right. But what about 81? I-81 I've heard for so long here at JMU. Is that a drug route? I mean, do people do it, or is it all interstates?
I believe it's all interstates.
It is. But do you see a lot of drug traffic through?
Quite a bit. Also, I'd like to point out, with the interviews there, it was mentioned statistics and the drugs as far as contributing to crimes and all. Probably within the city of Harrisonburg, well over 70% of our crime is some way related or associated with some type of substance abuse, which of course includes alcohol. So it is a significant factor as far as crime is concerned.
Do you get any, I just wondered, do you get any driving under the influence of drugs? I know that Virginia is now testing, Virginia troopers are now testing for drug use. Can you test for drug use?
Yes, of course the laws, the same laws that the troopers are using are the laws that's enforced by local and state, county sheriff's departments as well. And there is testing for other substances.
Okay, now Well, how does that happen? How does it work?
It would involve individuals being stopped as suspected of being under the influence, being required to take a blood test.
And they would take a blood test on the spot, or would
No, they'd be taken to, in our case, the emergency room, and blood samples drawn.
Okay. Can I get a quick response from that last video from you, Dr. Travis?
I guess a couple things. One, if we are getting the drugs from D.C., it's because there's a market.
Right.
I mean, if there's not a market, no one's going to sell it. And so one way to take it away is a market. There was some talk, I thought I heard one of the individuals talking about maybe legalizing certain drugs. Studies will show that if you got somebody on certain, if you don't make it legal, they won't use it. Or if you reduce the supply, if the armed forces and the police can reduce the supply, those curious ones will probably not use it. If you up the price, they may not. Now, there's a certain group that are going to do it anyway.
No matter
what. In our field, we would just like people to take away the demand. There's not need for these drugs to be happy. And that's what we need to get people thinking about.
And so you think the argument that this kind of thing drugs won't be that popular if they're not a taboo anymore, that's a bogus argument in your opinion?
I think drugs will not be popular if people see to be happy, to have meaning in life, you got it all in your head and in your physical being to do it. It's a concept that our society has totally forgotten about, and other societies had that. They didn't use drugs the way we did.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to a commercial, and we'll be right back.
Marijuana screws you up. It messes with your brain. It's illegal now. I don't think legalizing it will help anything. It'll still be a problem. People will probably just abuse it more.
I don't think it should be legalized because that's just another drug, and yes, it may help with some diseases and with medical things, but if you legalize one, then why don't you legalize the rest?
It's not good for you, so I guess this shouldn't be illegal.
It's a drug. I mean, it shouldn't be legal.
Every step, your child gets closer and closer to the problem of drug and alcohol abuse. Don't let it happen. Find out about drug abuse resistance education, or DARE America. It's an in-school program where community police officers teach kids how to say no to drugs the first time and every time. Support DARE America before your child gets too close to the edge.
Tell me, what is in? Everybody, I want to know. In, yeah. Oh, what is in? Ooh, yeah. What is in? Everybody, tell me, I got to know. What is in? What's in?
Hi, I'm Morgan Fairchild. Education is still our best defense against the spread of AIDS and the harm that can happen when people are not informed. That's why the Will Rogers Institute is offering a free booklet that can give you the facts. You'll learn how AIDS can be caught. You'll learn the difference between having the AIDS virus and having the disease. And you'll learn how to protect yourself and your family. For your free copy, write the Will Rogers Institute, White Plains, New York.
Notify ICU we're on our way. This is one of the few places where drugs belong on the job. In anesthesia, they serve a useful purpose. Each year, too many people end up here because of drug-related accidents in the workplace. And using cocaine or popping pills creates a dangerous combination with anesthesia. I know. I'm a nurse anesthetist. Anesthesia doesn't work with street drugs.
Remember, drugs don't work on the job.
There's a lot of good opinions on both sides. You know, there's a lot of reasons it could support us financially. It could cut down on the national debt and everything, but
I don't know, maybe it's a good thing because they could tax it and maybe spend the money somewhere else.
If you legalize it, it's like now people do it because they're not allowed to do it, so it's like forbidden. It's like whatever you're not supposed to do, people will do. So if you legalize it, it won't be that temptation anymore to do something you're not allowed to do.
In continuing this discussion on the drug problem, we now turn to the National Guardsman, Staff Sergeant Jay Shepard. Jay, discuss the the role of the National Guard in their action efforts, and then I'm going to ask the two of you to discuss possible solutions to the drug problem nationally and at the city and county level. Jay?
Our role right now is pretty limited. We're not, as I said before, we're not police officers, we're military. Our equipment is being used by police officers, or we're assisting them in use, such as helicopters. In D.C., we're using night vision devices to help D.C. police officers search bad neighborhoods from the air. The D.C. National Guard itself is a unit of military police officers, so they're helping assist in some of the paperwork and some of the grudge work, so we can free up the police officers to get out and do their what they need to do on the ground. Newport News, we're helping police officers, DEA agents search ships, trucks on 95. It's basically just to help free up the police force, which is just getting swamped with this whole thing.
In addition to being put on alert and maybe having to go down to Columbia.
Well, let's hope it doesn't happen, but it's getting worse.
It's getting worse. And do you have any solutions to the drug problem, quickly?
Well, my solutions, for the country, I can't really discuss that. But here on JMU, I think if we go to a type of thing that's happening around the schools around the nation with this drug-free JMU, I guess, and the people not using it start standing up and stop, turning the other way and looking the other way, then maybe we can solve this problem.
All right, and that'll take us into your thoughts on the matter, Detective Clater. What do you all need? Do you all need cooperation from any particular segment of society to accomplish your goals?
Of course, the problem is such that law enforcement itself cannot, effectively deal with this problem. What we need is for the public to get involved in the assistance of the public to say, we don't want this in our community, we're not going to stand for it in the community, and then to start reporting drug activity and be willing to get involved as far as court testimony.
And thus basically turn these people out.
That's correct.
Do people see this, and I want to ask this to Dr. Travis, do a lot of people see drug abuse and drug dealing as a victimless crime?
I guess some do. If you look at the number of students who know it's against the law to use these drugs, but yet they don't turn someone in. The dealer here is sometimes seen as a friend, so a lot do. And but if we look at a drug person heavily into drugs, they're really not happy. If you look at a drug abuser, they have a poor self-concept. When we're going to get into prevention, we've got to make a society that's equal for everybody to have a chance. We've got to start training people to have other ways of coping besides drugs, and to have success throughout life without using the drug. One analogy, the drug makes a high. One physiologic mechanism, it gets a high. When there's a high, the body is always going to go low. And something like cocaine, you go lower than that. If you do even something like a walk or talk to a friend or do a good paper or a good test, or look at that wildflower, you got a high and you might go up higher.
But what goes up must come down.
That's our principle. What goes up, and the cocaine people know that. They'll lace it with everything else or start with barbiturates or alcohol or use more cocaine thing to get that deep, deep depression that's going to come down from that. And why not use our body? The natural highs are there. The natural lows are there. It's okay to be low, too. We all get low. We've got to accept in society we all get low. And the good news is when you're low, you're going to come up. And you don't need a drug to do that. But we can somehow get people working with the other ways to do this instead of the social acceptance of using a drug. And we're different than other societies. We use drugs for stress reduction, and we use it for coping mechanisms. Other societies use it for ceremonies like weddings and many for medicinal purposes. But we've got heavy into drugs are recreation, drugs are coping, and I think we've got to change that.
Thank you so much for being here today. This has been quite a topic, and I think we've covered some good ground. Until next week, I'm your host, Stephen Fogelman. Have a nice one.